So yes, looking ahead, there is a test on Friday. It is over the unit circle. We started the unit circle before break. Again, a lot has happened in your life, in my life, over the break. I get that. But there's nothing new we're going to learn the next 3 days. We're going to review, we're going to review, we're going to review, and then we'll take the test on Friday. So yes, we're getting one right out of the gate, but you'll be okay. And again, if you'll look at the worksheet packet that we started a month ago, it feels like. If you look at the questions on page 1, or worksheet 1, and compare them to the questions on worksheet 5, the very last page, they're pretty much the same. So it's just more practice, more practice, more practice. Now, if you've forgotten everything, hopefully we can bring it back to your brain. So I don't want to just jump in and start working problems. I want to redraw the first quadrant of the unit circle. So without your unit circle next to you, I've got mine next to me, like this thing, but don't look at that. Find some spot to draw the first quadrant of the unit circle. And this will serve as our lesson/review for today, notes for today. That's a pretty good quarter circle there. So find a free spot. I don't think there's any free spots on the worksheets. Nope.
I somehow flipped to Unit 8, day 1.
Draw a quarter circle, and let's start filling in the stuff that we know. Start with, I think, the easy one. That angle right in the middle there. What angle is that? Like the one in the middle. This one's 45. What is it in radians?
It's a quarter.
Oh, let's back up. We'll get there the long way around. What is all the way around in radians? 2 pi.
So it's 1/4 pi.
So halfway around is pi. We're not doing the whole thing, but if it helps us to figure out where all these things are.
It's a quarter of a pi.
So pi over 2 is right there. 3 pi over 2 is on the bottom. And yes, pi over 4 is the 45-degree marker.
And I think of a whole pi.
So that's the one you don't have to have the whole thing memorized. If you can know that 2 pi is all the way around, you can figure out the pieces from there. There are 2 more angles, 30 and 60.
I think I should draw this.
I think you should draw this. What's 30 degrees in radians? And again, you can do the conversion, but it's better if you just know it. Pi over 6. And what's 60 degrees in radians? Pi over 3. Right, because pi over 3 is bigger than pi over 4 is bigger than pi over 6. So that's the angles. And then out to the side of each of those, we had an ordered pair. Do you remember what that ordered pair represented? You have to keep 2 things in mind. It's the ordered pair. It's the coordinates of this point. But it's also cosine and sine of the point. So those parentheses are cosine of the angle and sine of the angle. But they're also the coordinates. So we can maybe start at the easy one down here. So forget about sines and cosines. If r is 1 on our circle, and it is because it's the unit circle, the 1 unit circle, what are the coordinates of this point? I'll get your x and y. 1, 0. And that means that the cosine of 0 is equal to 1. And it means that the sine of 0 is equal to 0. Because the coordinates, the x-coordinate is the cosine, the y-coordinate is the sine. That's sort of the big deal with the unit circle. So the top one, what's the coordinates of the top point here? 0, 1. And then now for the tricky stuff, the in the middle stuff. I think the easiest one is pi over 4 because the x and y are the same. What value are they? Root 2 over 2. Remember we had the triangle? Oh, I didn't draw my picture to scale, but they're both root 2 over 2. They're equal to each other. Those are the middle values. At over 6, at 30 degrees, let's see, that makes this triangle. Which side's longer, the x side or the y side of this triangle? The x side's longer. I can just tell by looking the x side is longer. Which value goes with the long side? So cosine, but what is the value of all the long sides of triangles? Let's see. I don't know that I'm asking the question right. I mean, there's pretty much all the values on the unit circle. So the long side of a triangle is root 3 over 2. And the short side of a triangle, which one of those values is the short side of a triangle? The 1/2. That's the shortest, the smallest value. Yeah, if I'd have drawn it right, if I brought this over here, this would be halfway up, because that height is 1/2. On the pi over 3 triangle, at the risk of drawing too many triangles on one picture here, the x-coordinate is the short side. How long are short sides of triangles in the unit circle? 1/2. Like every short side is 1/2. The y side is a long side. How long is every long side in the unit circle? 3 over 2. Always. Short lengths are always 1/2. Long sides are always root 3 over 2. Medium lengths are always root 2 over 2. And then zeros and ones are at the quadrant markers, so you can figure those out. Now, why do I only need to draw the first quadrant? Why don't I need to draw the whole thing?
The others,
Yeah, it's the same for the others. It's just switch them. Let's be more specific. I mean, you're right. It is sort of the same, but what are we switching? Like, what's different about the other quadrants? The signs. And you might remember we even said all students take calculus. That's how some people remember it. All are positive in the first quadrant, sines positive in the second, tangents positive in the third.
Cosine and sine on the very bottom right, it's supposed to have the line in this zero.
They're not, because it's the sine of 0, not cosine of an angle. That's a good question. So some people use all students take calculus. Other people, they don't ever think about that because they know if you go to the left, that means the x-coordinate is negative. And if you go down, that means the y-coordinate is negative. And so that takes care of all students take calculus. On the other hand, some people use all students take calculus all the time, and I'll see that on their paper the rest of the year. Like as soon as I hand out a test, some students, that's like the first thing they do. All students take calculus. Okay, got my quadrants. I know who's positive where. Now I can work the rest of the test. All right, let's do some of Worksheet 3 together. I was worried about that. I don't have I don't know if I have any extra worksheets.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Also printed out.
So let's look at Worksheet 3. Here's the one. And again, we want to start working these where we don't have to draw the whole unit circle, where we don't have to have, this right next to us. Right now, if you took the time to draw this for the test, you would have time to do that. I don't want you to, but because the whole test is this, if you took a couple minutes to draw this out, you'd be okay. The problem is, going forward, you're going to need these values as part of other problems, and you won't have time to draw this whole thing out. So we want to get to the point where we can get answers quickly without drawing them out, or without drawing the full circle. Okay, so here's how I do these. I'm going to draw a little picture every time. So it's almost at 2 pi. That's a good thought, because that means what quadrant is it in? It's in quadrant 4. Is it the shallow, the middle, or the steep? How did you know it was the steep? Over 6 is shallow. Over 4 is middle. And over 3 is steep. Well, I don't know if it's beginning or end, kind of depends on where you are, but the highest slope. So this one is over 3, so it's steep. 5 over 3 is almost 2, so you know you're in the 4th quadrant.
Sleep.
So, sleep. So we'll draw the steep angle in the 4th quadrant. You told me it was steep 4th quadrant.
Yeah, I thought it would be closer to the... Isn't it closer to the 2 pi? Like that?
The angles always be so it's...
But it's the steep one. 11 pi over 6 would be the shallow angle close to 2 pi. If that's what you're thinking. But over 3 is the steep angles. So it's not closer to... And that's important because of how I work the problem is, now that I've got the picture drawn, I'm just thinking long sides and short sides. Let's see, sine. Is sine x or y? Y. So what's the y side in this problem? It's the long side. And how long are the long sides? Root 3 over 2. And then is it positive or negative? Why is it negative? Because it's down. That's the way I remember it. Or you can say all students take calculus and realize that sine is negative. Now, that's a lot of steps, but as you do these, you're going to do a lot of that stuff in your head. You're going to immediately know what quadrant it's in. You're going to immediately know shallow, middle, steep. You draw a quick picture and figure out if you need the long side or the short side. Although tangent of 4 pi over 3. So what quadrant is that in? What was that? What quadrant is 4 pi over 3 in? How many fingers are you holding up there? 3. There we go. You're giving me the side view, and I couldn't tell how many fingers that was. Yes, 3, because it's a little bit bigger than 1.
But since it's 3...
So, quadrant 3. Over 3 means it's steep. So I need a steep angle in the 3rd quadrant.
You really want to sleep. You're retired, huh?
The sleep angle. The steep angle in the 3rd quadrant. Uh-oh, tangent. That's not y or x. How do I find tangent?
X. Oh.
Which ratio is it? It's y over x. So this one's going to take a little bit of work. So the y, how long is the y side?
Jesus. 2 pi over 3. Yeah, that's what...
Root 3 over 2? And negative. And the x side is negative 1/2 because it's a short side. And then you can keep it, change it, flip it, or you can
root 3 over
root 3 over 1, which is just root 3. Yeah. And if you get stuck, you do keep it, change it, flip it. Once you've done some of these, you're like, wait a minute. The 2's cancel, and I've got root 3 over 1, which is just root 3.
That's it.
And the negatives cancel to make it positive. Or if you're using all students take calculus, you're in the third quadrant, and tangent should be positive, and it is. Let's do number 5. Cotangent.
I mean, just like the opposite.
Well, it's in the fourth
So
quadrant.
it's just
Okay, it's in the. Let's draw it first, and then we'll start thinking about x, y's, y's, and
It's
x's.
going to be split.
Quadrant 4, split the fourth quadrant. That's a great way to say it. I was going to say it's the middle angle, but split the fourth quadrant is a perfectly fine way to say that.
So it's going to be
it's root 2 over 2 over root 2 over 2.
Let's be careful. I think you're right. So it's x over y.
So it's just 1.
They're both root 2 over 2, so I don't really have to worry about that.
2 over negative root 2 over 2.
But one of those is negative.
Yes.
Doesn't really matter which one. It just means our answer will be negative. I guess if we want to be specific, which one is negative, the x or the y?
Y.
The y is negative.
Wait, no, it's not, because you got to get rid of the thing in there.
The y is negative, but once we do the whole ratio, it turns out to just be negative 1.
Yeah.
Tell me
Is it?
I still think that just me. Tell me
So I don't know that you need to write this down, but this is my thought process. The quadrant and shallow middle steep lead me to a picture. The quadrant combined with shallow middle steep, I put steep, not sleep that time, lead to a picture. And then I can just look at short sides, medium sides, and long sides. And every short side is 1/2, every medium side is root 2 over 2, and every long side is root 3 over 2. So I don't memorize the unit circle per se. As long as I can draw my picture accurately.
This one's split in the third quadrant.
Let's jump down and do number
No, 7's like 1 and
18. Secant 11 pi over 6. So what quadrant are we in? Fourth. Shallow, middle, or steep? Shallow, because 6 is always shallow. So the shallow angle in the fourth quadrant.
So it's going to be 3 over.
And you guys are jumping ahead, which is fine. Secant goes with cosine,
So it's not.
the flip of cosine.
So it's
Cosine is x. Just like once you get the hang of these, they go quick. But until you get the hang of them, there's a lot of steps, and it's a lot of steps that you try to do in your head, which is fine. It's just it's a lot of steps in your head if you're not writing things down.
what's is it?
So I need to flip that. So 2 over root 3. But then we don't like that.
Yes, you root 3 both sides.
So I
So
multiplied
it's 2 root 3 over
2 root 3 over 3.
That's it.
That is it. I mean, you say that's it. There was still like 10 steps in there. And how many of them you write is kind of up to you. I try to write them all down for people taking notes and trying to understand. Once you get the hang of it, some of you aren't going to write anything down. That's okay. I can't give you any partial credit if you don't have anything written down. If instead you have a picture drawn and it's accurate, then I can probably give you some partial credit. But let's Think how many steps we just did on that problem. We had to know the quadrant. We had to know shallow, middle, steep. We had to know that secant was the flip of cosine. We had to know that cosine is the x-coordinate. We had to know that this was the x was the long coordinate, and that the long coordinate is root 3 over 2. And then we had to flip it, and then we had to know how to fix it after we flipped it.
Is number 13.
So that's like 8 steps. And can you do all 8 of those in your head? Probably not yet. Can you do all those 8 steps by Friday in your head? Some of you will. Let's do number 20. Number 20, tangent. 3 pi over 2. Where's 3 pi over 2?
That's going to be in the third.
What quadrant is 3 pi over 2 in?
Third.
It's not in the third quadrant. It's not in the first quadrant. It's not in the second quadrant.
Fourth.
It's not in the fourth quadrant.
1, 2, 3, 4.
It's not in any quadrant. It's the same as 270. It's the straight down. So it's not in a quadrant. So I ask a tricky question. Tangent. How do I find tangent? Y over x. So we look at this point, and this is like once people get the hang of it, one of the most missed things is getting their x and y coordinates backwards, and then they get so frustrated to do everything else right, and then forget who's 0 and who's 1. Let's see. X is 0, y is negative 1. So negative 1 divided by 0 is undefined. So you can have undefined as a potential answer.
What about 0?
You can have 0 as an answer. Well, I don't want to say. There's your side lengths. 0, 1/2, root 2 over 2, root 3 over 2, and 1. But that's not all your answers, because you could have flips of those. And you could have tangents and cotangents where you have ratios of those. So there is a finite number of answers you could have, but it's not just those 5 answers. (27) Cosine of 240.
That's third quadrant.
That is the third quadrant. Yep. Right, because that's 180. That's 270.
It's the 60.
It's the 60 in the third quadrant. I know what you mean. Yeah. It is. It's 60 degrees into the third quadrant. What I would hope you would say or think it's the steep angle in the third quadrant, but it is this. I don't know if that's technically right,
Close enough.
but if you drew it correct, it'd be fine. If you said that's the 60 degree angle in the third quadrant, I would know what you mean. Let's see. Cosine is the x coordinate. So what's the x coordinate for that triangle?
Oh, it's the short side.
It's the short side.
Half.
So it's 1/2,
But it's negative.
but it's negative.
So cosine is just always just the x.
Cosine is always the x coordinate.
Okay. Is there one that's always just the y coordinate?
Yes, there is.
Sine.
Cosine is the x, sine is the y. What's tangent?
Both.
Which,
X
but which way?
Y over x.
Y over x. What's cotangent?
X over y.
X over y. What's secant? It's the flip of x because it's the flip of cosine.
Mm-hmm.
And what's cosecant?
Probably flips with flip of y.
The flip of y, the flip of sine. It's not hard, it's just a whole lot of steps.
Mm-hmm.
And the good news is there aren't any new steps between now and Friday. So if all of this was easy and it came back and you're like, oh yeah, I got this, then you'd be ready for the test. That's not most of you, but that's okay. That's why we're going to spend 2 more days on it. You want to do 29?
Seems that be as shallow, but it's not. It's steep.
315. So
60 is also.
wait, where's the?
That's the middle, isn't it?
It's the middle. 315 is in the middle. And by the way, most of you have now, you unwittingly are now preferring radians to degrees. Because it's like, nope. But over 3 is always steep. Over 4 is always middle. Over 6 is always shallow. That's the easy part of the radians. 315, you got to sit and think, wait a minute. It's definitely in the fourth quadrant. And it's the middle one in the fourth quadrant.
Wait.
Tangent is x over y. And yes, they're root 2 over 2, but because they're both root 2 over 2,
1.
the ratio will be 1. Now be careful with the plus and minus.
It's still, it's minus 1.
It's going to be negative 1. So again, you're starting to learn where you can skip some steps there. Yes, it's root 2 over 2, all over root 2 over 2, but that's 1. Alright, I have not posted these answers in the new Schoology yet, or the new, but I will post them.